So over the past couple days, I have gotten dozens of tickets of you guys asking me to talk about the Parlo situation. I want to be very clear, this video is not a hit piece on Parlo, but rather, some background context and just some information that I feel like the general public wouldn't necessarily have as somebody who has been a victim of certain commentary channels, as well as a commentary YouTuber myself. So with that in mind, we have a lot to go over today, so let's just get straight into it. And trigger warning, there is some sensitive topics, and keep in mind everything discussed is alleged. So, for those that don't know, Parlo is one of the biggest Roblox commentary YouTubers in the whole space, and he's known for calling people out by name, which I think is a kind of polarizing topic. I think, for one, if someone's done something actually abhorrent, and, there's a lot of evidence to back it up, and it seems really, disgusting, I think out of like a duty to the public, I think it's important to bring that stuff to light, I don't think people shouldn't be allowed to talk about other people. However, on my channel specifically, if I ever do talk about people, which is very rare, I think the only person I've actually ever really spoken about specifically is B-Plays, because there's a lot to that situation and quite a bit of evidence. However, anytime I've ever made a video talking about somebody, I always do something called using protective language. And what that looks like is by saying things like, oh, I don't know, it could be, allegedly, perhaps, I think that, my opinion is that, etc. And when I use those kind of words in my videos, a lot of people will comment saying, oh my god, Pommy, like, you should do research. You shouldn't be saying you don't know. You should have done research so you know for sure. And that's the thing that I feel like people don't understand. It's not that I didn't do research, and it's not that I don't know for sure in my opinion, it's that I don't want to get sued. And I think something that a lot of commentary YouTubers don't do is use protective language. And the first thing I did when I started a commentary channel, knowing that I was going to be addressing certain situations that were going to be sensitive in nature, was searching up the legalities and the legal restrictions of what I can and cannot say. And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of commentary YouTubers don't use protective language, and they're very quick to say, this person's a terrible person, and here's why, I hate this person, blah, 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 blah. And I understand some people might think when I say, oh, I don't know, or in my opinion, it makes my videos seem less persuasive, but my goal isn't to be persuasive. My goal is to talk about a situation and give context to it without trying to persuade or influence somebody's opinion. I could add my own opinion to the end, but I think what a lot of commentary YouTubers lack is the usage of protective language, which opens them up for lawsuits and litigation, which I think is just a whole situation that unfortunately a lot of younger commentary YouTubers will see these big YouTubers making these bold statements like, this is the worst YouTuber I've ever seen in my entire life, and this person's disgusting. But the truth is, although, I would say the majority of the time allegations that surface are truthful in nature. However, they're either highly sensationalized, highly exaggerated, or they're just flat out lies. And what's really harmful is when channels don't use protective language, or they don't emphasize and clarify that the stuff they're talking about is alleged, it can really, harm somebody's reputation, especially if they're innocent. And also it misleads younger commentary creators into making really bold statements that they may not have the financial means to back up. And, legal knowledge, although I'm not a lawyer, as someone who's involved in the legal space is all I'll say. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people take legal advice, or creators being like, hey, just be careful, you could be subpoenaed, be careful, like this could be libel, whatever, right? I think people sometimes take that as an attack, but when I say that to somebody, it's not to try and attack them or scare them, it's to be honest, because I think people just aren't necessarily super educated on the legal implications of making commentary content, and a lot of people just assume, oh, it's just spitting out my opinion, but there's a lot more that you have to look into, specifically with the way that you word stuff, and being very careful that you're not outwardly accusing somebody of something, and being very mindful of how you phrase that, because at the end of the day, if you're talking negatively about somebody, they have, motivation to try and sue you, even if it's just your opinion. But by using protective language, any lawyer that comes across your video, or if they try to get a lawyer involved, they'll see that video and be like, yeah, we don't have a case here. They use protective language, versus somebody who's saying, this is fact, this is fact, this is fact, when it may not be. Then they have a case for libel, slander, defamation, whatever it might be, right? And so I think that's the first thing I want to highlight, is that a lot of these creators don't use protective language, which unfortunately, it takes away from the severity of situations, and it sensationalizes and exaggerates situations, which doesn't do any justice to the actual victims of the situation. And that's where I'm going to get into my own experience. As a child, to make a very, very long story short, I may do a separate story time on this in the future, but as a child, I went through something incredibly sensitive and traumatic, and it completely altered the trajectory of my life. That's basically all I'm going to say about that. But as a result, I shared what had happened to me with some close friends I had online on Roblox that I thought were my friends. And I was a child, keep this in mind, a minor. And I shared this information with those friends, which those friends, knowing that it was sensitive personal information, then went ahead and shared that information with a commentary YouTuber. And I want to clarify, this commentary YouTuber is no longer in the space, so don't try to find them. They've retired. It was some guy. It doesn't matter. But they're not there anymore, so no point trying to look for it. But this commentary YouTuber was trying to make a hit piece on another YouTuber, which is basically like a video that portrays another creator as being a bad person, and here are all the reasons why ABCD. And they decided they were going to use my trauma that I experienced in real life that resulted in me going to the hospital, resulted in the police being involved, or all this sort of stuff, right? And they were going to use that situation as a point to attack this other commentary YouTuber. And they made a video, literally not mentioning my name, but called me by a fake name, and made this video and accused this completely innocent creator of having done what was done to me. And not only was that super unethical, but also that YouTuber basically just re-traumatized me, because my trauma and stuff that happened to me that was very serious in real life was being regurgitated online without my consent, without my permission, and was being used to paint a completely innocent person as this terrible individual. And so not only was my trauma being weaponized, but it was being weaponized to try to ruin somebody's life. And the issue was, when this person tried to defend themselves and they made a video defending themselves, they called out my Roblox username, who I was on Roblox, like my childhood account, and made a video saying, well, this person's the one it happened to, and I never did that to them, so they're lying. And then I got a massive influx of Roblox DM requests, or people following me into games being like, you're a liar, you lied about what happened to you, this isn't true, which was so incredibly hurtful, because this went from me sharing something that had happened to me with a close friend on Roblox to being shared with thousands of people on YouTube by some commentary YouTuber who wanted to weaponize what happened to me to use it to paint somebody as a terrible person. And when that person tried to defend themselves, rightfully so, my childhood Roblox account's username was leaked to another thousands of people, and then people were harassing me, calling me a liar, and saying I lied about my trauma, when in reality, it was the original commentary YouTuber who lied about everything and took things out of context. And that's what I really take issue with, is that I feel like there are certain commentary YouTubers in this space who will use trauma or something has happened to somebody, and they'll use it as this, thing to paint people as bad individuals. And I think there's a difference between somebody posting something publicly, because I know people might point out my Megan Plays videos and say, well, you're doing the same thing. Well, no, it's not the same thing, because Megan has chosen what she will and will not share publicly, and I've only ever addressed things that she has shared publicly, which was her choice to share. The difference in my situation was I was a child, a minor, and I shared this with a close friend who then shared it with some other people, who then shared it with a massive YouTuber at the time, who then published my trauma for money. And that's the difference here. That's the difference in morality and ethics, in my opinion, right? Is that there are certain creators on the platform that, although maybe they started with good intentions, I think they quickly get just disillusioned with how much money they can make. Because, guys, like, genuinely, I don't think people necessarily realize how much money you can make. But let's just say I made 1/3 of my yearly salary last month alone on YouTube. And that's not to brag, that's not to be like, oh, like, I'm so good, but it's to put context to this. People have a reason to be dramatizing videos, and I don't necessarily want to villainize somebody for doing that. However, I think people, especially commentary YouTubers, oftentimes get blinded by the amount of money that you're making and are like, wow, like, I can keep doing this, and so sometimes I feel like the line between morality and honesty versus, sensationalized and lies becomes a little bit blurred. And YouTubers, although maybe had good intentions, start to create content that doesn't align with their views, and content that is highly exaggerated, which unfortunately just ends up doing a massive disservice to the community and adds to the spread of misinformation. And again, as somebody who was actually victimized by that, I cannot tell you how harmful that was. And that's part of the reason why I barely ever play my childhood account, because this happened years ago, and it's still like, I'll still get like random people who maybe saw the video who are like, oh wait, I think you're the one who lied about that. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. And that's the issue, is that although they have maybe good intentions, they actively re-victimize victims that they claim and preach that they're trying to protect, when in reality, you're taking what happened to me out of context to harm somebody else. You know what I mean? So it makes me look like a bad person when I was just a child victim. The other thing too is I find certain commentary channels can also be a highly hypocritical. Example, this one channel, which actually there's a variety of them, but when people make commentary content, you don't own the rights to what you're talking about. Anybody can talk about it. I think that's important to know. And I think people oftentimes see various commentary YouTubers all talking about the same situation in the same day and accuse each other of copying each other, which I don't think is valid, because everybody has a right to give their opinions on a situation. And just because one person commented on a situation first doesn't mean that they own the whole situation, right? However, what I take issue with, and what personally happened to me, is when I spent hours doing research, taking screenshots, scrolling through hundreds of comments to find what I was looking for, saving information, doing theories. I spent a lot of time making my videos, and then to upload it to YouTube and have a creator who's like a gazillion times bigger than my channel take every single screenshot from my videos and put it in their videos, which that would be fine because I don't own the rights to the comments, but to not even credit somebody where you got all your research from is just so weird. And then I find out later that the same YouTuber is apparently somebody who was getting mad at another commentary YouTuber a while ago for copying their videos. So the duality and hypocrisy of it is just something that I see a lot in the commentary community. And again, nobody owns the rights to specific situations. However, I think it's fair that if you get basically like 80% of your video from somebody else's video, you should just say, hey, I watched this video, I thought it was useful, this is where I got some information from. And I think it's unfortunately pretty harmful when especially larger creators are taking content from smaller creators or taking research from smaller creators, because a shout out, it wouldn't have cost you anything, but it would really help that smaller creator. And I'm not going to sit here and cry for shout outs, but then when I put a watermark on my video next time, they still took screenshots from my video, which was really silly. But regardless, I'm not super hung up about it. However, the thing to point out here is that there's a lot of hypocrisy in the commentary space. And I think that's something that, again, newer commentary YouTubers maybe don't realize. And I think it's important to highlight that although maybe people have good intentions with posting their content, I feel like those good intentions are undermined when you're actively taking content or not crediting your sources. I try very hard to credit all my sources in my videos. And there's been times where I maybe credit the wrong person by accident. I get a ticket, I fix it, whatever. It's just, I don't understand the resistance from some commentary YouTubers to just credit somebody for work or to just communicate with somebody and say, hey, your video was helpful, thank you. I don't know, but that's another thing to talk on, as well as the bandwagon effect, which if you guys don't know what that is, and it's something I've certainly seen with the Parlo situation, is it's basically when something becomes the next big thing and every single person kind of hops on the bandwagon. An example, think of it like this. Maybe when you were in school, a new iPhone comes out, and then all of a sudden everybody in your class is getting the new iPhone and you're the only one without it, and they're like, oh, why don't you have the new iPhone? That's kind of what the bandwagon effect is, to make it very simple. But ever since these new accusations regarding Parlo and him allegedly mismanaging money and allegedly going somewhere to meet somebody, whatever, there's been a lot of creators, commentary creators, who were close with Parlo, who are making videos, about this is my experience with Parlo, this is what he did to me. And I think, at the end of the day, everybody's experience is valid and you should be able to share your experience. However, what's interesting is, from my knowledge and from people I've spoken to, there are a number of people who've made videos about the situation that knew about what was going on and knew that maybe some of the allegations were rooted in truth far before anybody else did. And then instead of addressing it, they wait until, it's the fan to make a quick buck and monetize off of their coworkers' downfall, which, I think is, I don't know. I find the whole bandwagon thing in the commentary community specifically just to be very weird. And that's why I don't have really any relationships with anybody in this space. There are some people that I've spoken to that, we've collaborated on research and exchanged information, which I think is super helpful, especially when you're trying to make videos of, a similar genre. However, I think it's really interesting when people preach being best friends online or being really close coworkers. And then as soon as something comes out about their friend or something, that they're very quick to throw them under the bus, which I believe the allegations against Parlo, which are allegations right now, are valid to not be friends with somebody. And I think people have the right to choose when they aren't and are not friends. However, if you look at the history between a lot of these commentary YouTubers, they've had a gazillion falling outs with each other and beef with each other, which I think it's good that people can work through that. But just the portrayal of, oh, we're best friends, we're such good friends, and everything was fine, and all of a sudden I was blindsided by this. Well, that's not true. That's not true. And I'm being very careful here not to name names because I think there's a lot of people involved in this that, naming names isn't going to make a situation better. And I'm going to be very mindful that I'm not naming names for a very specific reason. And for those of you that do want to name names in the comments, it's getting deleted. But regardless, I think it's just this whole Parlo situation, honestly, in my opinion, has been used for a lot of creators to make a quick buck off his name and to be very quick to throw him under the bus. Because unfortunately, although I think some creators see others as, co-workers in a space, and I personally think that, I think anybody who wants to make commentary content, great, awesome. There's more than enough room for everybody, right? However, I do think there are certain creators out there that are using this opportunity as a way to boost their own platform and preach themselves as being this white knight savior. Oh my god, guys, I'm so much better. I would never do this. I'm so disgusted. Meanwhile, you have a track history of doing some not so great things, and you have had on-off beef with a variety of creators for a long time. And just like seeing like some of these videos, which I've seen very few, I'm gonna be honest, because I didn't want to like get my opinion swayed too much, but seeing some of these creators now posting screenshots of conversations they had where other creators are talking bad about each other and they're making lies up and they're actively like conspiring together to try and cancel somebody, it's just so weird. It's really weird. And I feel like commentary creators should come together to bring awareness to issues that need to be publicized and issues that need to be brought to the public's attention, not to try and take out all of your competition. I think that's really bizarre. But regardless, that's just kind of like my whole opinion on the situation, I guess, but you can call it. I find a lot of commentary YouTubers like to act as the authorities, the white knights, the saviors, the morally correct, the virtuous, and they use false altruism to make themselves seem like these amazing people. And although I don't agree with what Parlo has allegedly done, I think it's important to highlight that Parlo is not the antithesis of a terrible, horrible, demonic commentary creator. And I think people need to realize like how actually common some aspects of Parlo's behavior is with the commentary community in general. And I'm not saying that's right, but I'm trying to say that to bring understanding to the fact that there is a lot of bad actors in this space and a lot of people that don't have good intentions when they release videos. And there's obviously been times where I released videos with good intentions and they weren't received well, and that's okay. That's a lesson that you learn from, right? However, I think it's different when you routinely either A, steal content from other creators, B, highly dramatize, or, try to make these stories so hysterical to get so many views and likes and stuff like that, and just acting like it's the end of the world when situations that sometimes you're addressing are very minimal. It's just the whole kind of space of it is a very polarizing space, is what I'll say. There's people who preach themselves as being saviors, which I think a lot of them have good intentions. However, the way they go about enacting that, or the way they go about, showing that to the community, isn't always the best. And I don't think any individual is inherently evil or anything like that. I just think that the money that's associated with commentary content sometimes becomes so much that it blinds people and it blinds their judgment and makes them forget what's important. And so for anybody who's asking about my specific opinion on the Parlo situation, I'm gonna be honest, I don't have one. I think there's a lot of information going around right now, and from the screenshots that I've seen of what some YouTubers have leaked, there's typically a lot of co-conspiracy or conspiring to try and ruin somebody's reputation further when they have some sort of drama. So personally, I don't necessarily want to speak exactly or directly to the situation until Parlo's made a statement about it, just because I feel like that's like the respectful thing to do. But regardless, I want to make this video to give some context into the background to some things that I've noticed just from being in the commentary space for the short time that I have been, and my experience as being both a creator and a victim of commentary channels. I think commentary is a very turbulent space. However, it's very needed. It just really depends on how you go about approaching issues. That really goes to show what your intentions are. But regardless, let me know your guys' thoughts on this in the comment section below. It's obviously a pretty messy situation, and I do want to clarify, if there's any names mentioned, they will be promptly removed because I don't need drama. This video is just to point out some things that I've seen without, actively trying to cause issues for other creators. But with that in mind, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!